A former Black Ops pilot turned forgotten base mechanic uncovers a dangerous intelligence breach no one else sees and risks everything to expose it. When her warnings are ignored, she takes to the sky in a decommissioned helicopter, triggering a base-wide reckoning that changes everything. What begins as a desperate act becomes the spark for a new generation of vigilance, trust, and legacy. Welcome to my channel. They say once you've flown in combat, the sky never lets you go. I used to scoff at that, back when I was Captain Jordan Ray, Special Ops Aviator, Shadow Division, Black Flights, Unmarked Birds, missions no one ever admitted happened. But these days, I'm just the ghost in Base 7. I'm 39 now, and I spend my mornings wrenching on helicopters at Midland Ridge Air Base, out in the dust-choked stretch of Arizona where even the lizards salute. My name doesn't ring bells anymore. My boots are worn down, and my ID badge just says Technician 3rd Class. Hell of a come-down for someone who once flew blackout into Kabul with a team of ghosts. I didn't ask for this gig. After the op near Kestrel Ridge, one that never made any report, not officially, I resigned my commission. There were complications. People stopped making eye contact with me. The Pentagon buried our mission under enough red tape to choke an aircraft carrier, and Shadow Division got scrubbed from existence. Like we were never there. Like we didn't bleed. So now I spend my days fixing rotors and replacing gaskets, drinking bad coffee in the hangar bay, and watching kids in clean uniforms play soldier. That was until I noticed something off last Tuesday. I was doing a standard inspection on a Bell Viper, routine checks, nothing special, when I saw the serials didn't match. The bird had been modified. Subtle, but unmistakable. Communication systems patched in ways that didn't make sense. A relay circuit rerouted. The kind of work you only notice if you've lived inside these machines. I brought it to Lieutenant Colonel Hanley, my supervisor. A desk guy with a Harvard jawline and the tactical instincts of a filing cabinet. "Ray," he muttered, barely glancing up, "you're a tech, not counter-intel. Maybe lay off the spy novels." I clenched my teeth so hard I thought I'd snap a molar. I tried again. "Sir, these aircraft are being modified for unauthorized transmissions. It's a data siphon, clean as day." He gave me that bureaucratic smile. "You're not cleared for these kinds of assumptions." Right. The next few days, I started watching people. Especially Captain Rojas, fresh out of flight school with a sharp uniform and a smirk that hadn't seen real combat. I noticed him texting constantly in the mess, always angling his phone away like a teenager hiding something from mom. One night, I saw him slip a drive into his jacket after hours near Bay 4. I'd seen that kind of behavior before. Afghanistan. Mali. Qatar. Guys who smile in the light but work in shadows. I started pulling logs. Maintenance entries. Flight schedules. Personnel movement. And a picture formed, ugly and sharp. There was a data leak planned during an upcoming training flight. Not just a leak, an exfiltration of top-tier classified systems, likely tagged to foreign intel buyers. I reported it. Again. They laughed. "Ray thinks she's on a Netflix thriller," joked Rojas one morning in the mess hall. "Next thing you know, she'll be telling us the vending machines are wiretapped." I kept eating my cereal. Let them laugh. But that night, I watched from a dark corner of the maintenance bay as 3 officers, Rojas included, opened a panel on one of the UH-72s. They were working fast, installing something. I snapped a few silent photos with my old field phone. The next morning, I made my decision. Base 7 held an old hawk, a decommissioned bird I kept pristine out of sheer respect. I called her Midnight. She was mine before any of them even knew which end of a wrench to hold. I'd kept her tuned, flight-ready, even if technically she was nothing more than a relic. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the desert and the base lights flickered on one by one, I walked into Base 7. My flight suit was zipped. My old dog tags, long tucked away, now hung from my neck. I climbed into the seat, ran the pre-flight with muscle memory that felt like slipping into a favorite jacket. Her systems lit up like she remembered me. And then I lifted off. And all hell broke loose. Sirens. Shouting. A voice over the comms. Unauthorized takeoff. Repeat. Unauthorized. Someone call command. She's stealing a helicopter. If only they knew why. The hawk responded like she'd been waiting for this. I guided her out low and fast, skimming the desert edge as base floodlights flared behind me. Inside the tower, someone was probably choking on their coffee. "Midnight Hawk, you are in violation of restricted airspace," came a panicked voice over open comms. "Land immediately, or you will be intercepted." I didn't reply. I switched to an encrypted Shadow Division channel, one I was never supposed to use again, and transmitted everything. Photos, coordinates, logs, data trails. I gave them names, locations, and timestamps. Then I sent one more thing, a warning. They're planning the extraction tonight. You stop me, you lose everything. I knew they'd scramble the Apaches. Sure enough, 10 minutes in, I spotted them, two shadows slicing across the moonlight. Their rotors thundered like a war drum. They were sleek, angry machines built for one thing: kill whatever gets in the way. The lead bird radioed in. Unauthorized aircraft, you will be engaged if you do not change course. You have 60 seconds to comply. I stayed my course. Calm. I keyed up the shadow line again. Transmission complete. Check tail number for confirmation. This isn't a theft. It's a rescue. And just like that, the world changed. They saw it. The insignia I'd etched by hand into Midnight's tail boom a decade ago. A talon clasping a black wing, shrouded in smoke. Shadow Division's emblem. Unofficial. Untraceable. But for those who knew, it was gospel. Apache 1 to control. The pilot's voice cracked for a second. We have a confirmed Shadow insignia. Repeat, Shadow Division insignia on tail boom. Standing by for further instructions. The sky went quiet. I could feel the tension through the airwaves. No one wanted to be the one who pulled the trigger on someone wearing that mark. Not unless they were sure. Within seconds, I heard a different voice cut in. Crisp, commanding, East Coast accent. General Daryl Keene. All units, stand down. Repeat, stand down. Captain Jordan Ray is operating under emergency authorization. Redirect support. I exhaled for the first time since takeoff. The Apaches dropped into escort formation. Midnight purred under my hands. It felt like the old days, except now, I was the one calling the plays. We flew low into the foothills, just outside a communications dead zone. That's where the handoff was scheduled. Grid Echo 9. A civilian SUV with diplomatic plates was already there, backed up to an unmarked chopper. Inside that SUV, I'd bet my last paycheck, were drives full of classified flight codes, radar frequencies, encryption layers. Everything a foreign power would need to blind our response net. I lit them up with the spotlight. Rojas and his two co-conspirators froze like kids caught sneaking out. This is Captain Ray. I barked over the base-wide channel. You are surrounded. Shut the vehicle down and step away. They hesitated. The Apaches adjusted angle, very deliberately. They surrendered. Didn't say a word. Just dropped to their knees, hands behind their heads like they'd trained for it, which they had, ironically. Base security arrived within 6 minutes, transported them in cuffs, and secured the vehicle and the drives. By the time I landed Midnight on the secure pad back at base, the sun was just starting to rise, casting orange light over hangars and towers. I climbed out slowly, heart still hammering, and found myself facing a full detail: military police, Pentagon suits, and one guy I hadn't seen in 12 years. General Keene. He approached, hand outstretched. Captain Ray, he said, voice low. You may have just prevented one of the largest internal breaches in recent history. I took his hand, but didn't smile. I warned them, I said. They laughed. His jaw tightened. Not anymore. They kept me at Central Command for 7 hours after landing. 7 hours of debriefs, rapid-fire questions, and clearance checks that buzzed like angry bees in the background. But I sat there, steady as a mountain. I had nothing to hide, and more than that, I had proof. General Keene handled most of it himself. He'd aged since our last op together, grayer, more lines around his eyes, but his mind was still sharp enough to cut glass. At one point, he leaned in and asked quietly, "Why didn't you just walk away, Jordan?" I looked at him for a long beat. Because no one else would have noticed. No one else wanted to. He nodded once. That was enough. By the time the full scope came out, the base looked like a shaken anthill. Rojas and his buddies weren't just moonlighting as moles. They were part of a coordinated intelligence extraction ring, military-grade espionage disguised as routine training exercises. The equipment they'd modified could have relayed live comms to enemy satellites in under 3 minutes. That's how close we'd come. News traveled fast. By the next morning, I couldn't walk into the mess hall without eyes following me like shadows. The same people who mocked me last week now whispered in corners and cleared paths when I passed. I didn't care. Respect that arrives after the fact always feels hollow. Major Lennox, one of the brass who'd brushed off my first report, stood at the end of the mess line that morning. He didn't say anything, just nodded stiffly as I walked by with my tray. That nod, it said everything. It said, I was wrong. It said, you saved us. I still didn't care. Back at Hangar Base 7, Midnight sat gleaming like a warhorse brought back from exile. They'd officially recommissioned her within 24 hours, refueled, rearmed, and sealed with a fresh paint job, though I insisted they leave the Shadow Insignia untouched. Funny, isn't it? The same bird they'd written off was now the center of an internal operations memo titled Protocol Ray. That afternoon, General Keene met me again in the hangar. He carried a manila folder under one arm. Assessment unit is impressed, he said, handing me the file. They want you on the Special Threat Evaluation Board. Civilian consultant status. Part-time. But you'd help shape counterintelligence protocols going forward. I flipped the folder open. Intel reports. Training frameworks. A spot for a signature. You offering me a desk, General? I asked, raising an eyebrow. He smirked. A chair. You choose how often you sit in it. I considered for a moment. As long as I still get to fix my birds, we have a deal. Done. He left me alone after that. A few minutes later, a kid from base ops, I think his name was Tran, approached me with a hesitant step. He looked about 20, maybe 21, clean boots and eager eyes. Ma'am, he said, could you show me how you spotted the modification on the bell? I mean, how'd you even notice? I looked him over, saw the sincerity, the hunger to learn. That was rare. Sure, I said, wiping my hands on a rag. But it's not about what you see. It's about what shouldn't be there. He nodded quickly and followed me toward the aircraft bay like a student chasing his first lesson. The funny thing about being right is, people suddenly start acting like you're a prophet. But I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was trying to stop a crime. Big difference. Still, the shift was undeniable. By week's end, officers who used to avoid eye contact were now stopping me in hallways, asking questions about protocol, wiring diagrams, security layers. Even Base Command invited me to speak, informally, to the newer recruits. Just a small session in the ops room about aircraft vulnerabilities. I stood in front of 20 freshly minted lieutenants, most still smelling like starch and optimism. I didn't sugarcoat a damn thing. If you're waiting for command to tell you what's wrong, I told them, you're already too late. Learn the difference between wear and tear and surgical tampering. Trust your gut, but verify it with data. They took notes like their lives depended on it. Good. Someday they might. Later that week, I was in Bay 4 checking a bird that had a history of comm issues when Lieutenant Zeke Rodriguez approached. Same guy who once joked I should write sci-fi instead of fixing helicopters. No? He had a notepad and a 1,000-yard stare. Captain Ray, he began, voice low, I owe you an apology. I didn't answer. Just let him talk. Not just for the jokes. For doubting your eyes. Your judgment. I thought I understood service. But I only understood rank. You made me realize the difference. I looked at him a moment. He wasn't faking it. The shame was real. And more importantly, the change was, too. You want to do better? I asked. He nodded. Then start by learning how to listen when someone without a shiny badge tells you something that doesn't sit right. Arrogance doesn't keep our skies safe. Awareness does. He jotted that down like gospel. That same day, Midnight was moved to a dedicated flight slot. Not for combat. Not yet. Just patrol flights. Observational runs. But they gave her back to me. Officially. My name etched onto the roster again for the first time in years. When I touched her controls on that first authorized flight, I swear it felt like the air welcomed me back. Like the sky had missed me. After touchdown, I was walking across the tarmac when Major Keene pulled up in an unmarked Humvee. He leaned out the window and said, Washington's buzzing. They want to know what a decommissioned mechanic knew that 6 analysts didn't. They're looking in the wrong places, I said. He grinned. Exactly why I told them to shut up and take notes. Back at the hangar, Lieutenant Thompson, the one who once mocked me most, waited with a serious look on his face. He didn't waste time. I submitted a transfer request, he said. Counterintelligence Division. I want to learn how to see things before they become disasters. You serious? As a heart attack. I nodded. Then remember this. The best intel officers ask more questions than they answer. Start there. He smiled, tight and grateful. That night, I stood in Bay 7 alone. Midnight shadow stretched long under the overhead lights. And I realized something. I didn't need a new mission. I had one already. Train the next generation. Show them what vigilance looks like. And maybe, just maybe, Make sure no one else has to steal a bird just to be believed. It's strange how fast a reputation can change. 1 month, I was the crazy mechanic with delusions of espionage. The next, I was briefing command-level personnel on aircraft breach points. They gave it a name, the Ray Protocol. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't even mine, really. Just a checklist. Anomalies in communication systems, unlogged hardware swaps, behavioral patterns, and personnel movements. But it worked. Other bases started implementing it. Quietly, of course. No press releases. No awards. Just murmurs passed between the sharp-eyed and the sharp-eared. And that was just how I liked it. Still, some things changed louder than others. Major Sarah Hayes, the Apache pilot who'd once been cleared to shoot me down, started dropping by the hangar. Not in uniform. Not in command. Just Hayes. She'd bring 2 coffees, every time, no sugar, heavy cream. One day, she asked, "How'd you stay calm that night? With 2 gunships tracking you?" I shrugged. I knew if you were half the pilot they said you were, you'd recognize the mark. The job teaches you when to trust instinct, and when to let the system catch up. She stared at me for a moment, then said, "You weren't wrong about me. I did see it, and I haven't stopped thinking about it since." Now she was sitting in my training sessions, asking sharp questions, helping redesign interceptor protocols. The same pilot who nearly turned me into confetti was now helping me build a stronger response network. Life's funny like that. Then came the invitation. General Keane called me into his office. No briefing. Just a folder with Pentagon seals and a line that said, "Consideration for Strategic Security Liaison, Shadow Division, Legacy Division Advisor." I looked at him. "You trying to drag me back into the dark?" He grinned. "No. I'm asking you to shine a little light on it." I didn't answer right away. That night, I sat on the edge of my bunk, dog tags in one hand, the patch from Shadow Division in the other. The black talon, still worn at the edges. I'd kept it in a drawer for years. We were never supposed to exist. And maybe that's why I did what I did, to make sure people like us weren't forgotten. Next morning, I told General Keane yes. Not as a soldier. As a consultant. My terms. My pace. He didn't argue. A few days later, something else shifted. Young Rodriguez, who was now shadowing me during inspections, asked, "Ma'am, you think you'll ever fly combat again?" I paused, hand resting on a rotor shaft. I think flying was never about combat. It was about knowing when to act, and how to land without burning everything down. He nodded slowly, like he was still chewing it over. By then, word had spread to the Pentagon, and I started getting emails. Messages from bases I'd never set foot on. Questions about security frameworks. Praise for the Ray Protocol. Even one line from a forward unit in Ukraine. Caught a breach thanks to your checklist. Lives saved. Respect, Captain. I didn't need fanfare. But knowing someone out there was safer because of something I taught? Yeah, that mattered. 3 weeks after that flight, Fort Midland Ridge didn't just look different, it felt different. You could sense it in the way people checked their equipment now. You heard it in conversations quieter, more thoughtful. Like the whole base had been shaken awake. They held a ceremony. Not public. Not in dress blues. Just a few rows of chairs in the command hall. The Shadow Division insignia hung on a cloth banner behind the podium. I stood in the back, hands in my jacket pockets, trying not to look uncomfortable. General Keane stepped up to the mic. "We're here to recognize someone whose file is mostly blacked out, whose history doesn't show up on most rosters, but whose actions reminded us why we wear the uniform." He gestured to the banner behind him. Shadow Division's motto was never made public. But those who served under it knew. We don't need the light. We carry it. He turned to face me. Captain Jordan Ray is proof of that. There was polite applause. A few nods. But the moment that stuck with me didn't happen at the podium. It happened after, in the hangar. Lieutenant Thompson approached, holding a clipboard and looking like he'd swallowed a nail. "I've been thinking about what I said. Back then," he started. "About you. About your past. I was wrong. I know I can't undo that. But I want to be better. I want to see things before they break." "You want a second chance," I said. "I want to learn how not to need one," he replied. That earned him a small smile from me. We walked over to Midnight, now painted in regulation gray, the tail insignia polished but unaltered. She looked proud. "Ready? You see this bird?" I said. "This one survived 3 direct hits and still got us home. But only because the crew trusted what they couldn't see." "What do you mean?" "The warning light failed. But the rattle in the pedals didn't. That's what saved us. Intuition backed by experience. You learn to listen to that. You stay alive." He nodded. "Teach me." So I did. Later that day, Hayes dropped by again. She'd finished a patrol flight and was still in her gear, helmet tucked under one arm. I reviewed the intercept protocols, she said. And I've been thinking, maybe it's time we redesign them from the ground up. I raised a brow. From scratch. With your help, she said. If you're willing. I nodded once. I'm in. The rest of the week blurred by. Meetings, training sessions, more young officers asking the right questions. I even started holding late-night briefings. Off the books. Just a dozen or so people, no rank talk, just war stories and practical lessons. We called it Midnight School, because it always started when the base got quiet. And because, let's face it, the name fit. It wasn't about me. It was about legacy. About passing down something useful before time or bureaucracy buried it. And deep down, I realized something I hadn't in years. I didn't just belong here again. I mattered. Midnight School grew faster than I expected. What started as a handful of curious kids in folding chairs turned into 30 officers crowding around a chalkboard I scrounged from the supply depot. We met in the back of Base 7. No ranks. No scripts. Just what they needed to know if they wanted to stay alive or keep others alive. One night, Rodriguez stayed after. I recognized a signal anomaly today, he said. Exactly like you described. Logged it. They found a backdoor uplink. I gave him a rare nod. Good work. He hesitated. I used to think respect was about being saluted. It's not, I said. It's about being heard when it matters. Meanwhile, the base was adapting. Security protocols were sharper. Command ran monthly red team drills, testing for infiltration, not just brute force. For once, the enemy wasn't just a shadow concept, it was understood. Even Major Hayes started bringing younger pilots to me for training. She said, they need to learn how to see what isn't in the manual. Somewhere in that hangar, I'd gone from outcast to compass. One afternoon, as I cleaned Midnight's gauges, I caught sight of my reflection in the canopy. Older, weathered, but solid. And I thought, maybe this is what survival looks like. Not medals, not speeches, just showing up. Every day, the change wasn't just in people, it was in the work. Pilots checked their pre-flights twice. Mechanics started reporting anomalies instead of brushing them off. And when I spoke, people listened. Even Thompson, who once mocked my warnings, became one of the sharpest voices in Midnight School. One night, he lingered after everyone left. I put in a request, he said. Transfer to counterintelligence. I want to help catch things before they slip through. I believed him. You ready for the quiet part of the job? I asked. The part where no one thanks you? He smiled. I'm ready to be invisible. That's when I knew he got it. Back in the hangar, the old routines meant something new. Even maintenance felt like mission work. Each inspection, each checklist, it wasn't busy work anymore. It was vigilance. Hayes swung by one afternoon, grease on her flight gloves. Heard about the leak you flagged last week. You're still saving us. I just shrugged. Old habits. The base commander started referring new officers to me directly. One called me ma'am, and I nearly laughed. But deep down, I knew what it meant. They trusted me now. Not because I demanded it. Because I'd earned it. 6 months after the breach, Fort Midland Ridge held a security symposium. Officers flew in from other bases. And somehow, I ended up on the panel. I spoke last. Kept it simple. The biggest threats don't always wear a uniform or wave a flag. Sometimes, they carry a toolbox and smile too wide. I looked around the room. You want to protect this country? Learn to listen before it's too late. No applause. Just silence. The kind that means people heard you. Afterward, Keen pulled me aside. That protocol you helped design? They're rolling it out at 6 more installations. I didn't say much. Just nodded. Back at the hangar, I got a message from Rodriguez. He was overseas now. Spotted a tampering pattern using Midnight School drills. Neutralized it before takeoff. He signed off with, you were right. It's never about the light. It's about what we see in the dark. I stared at that message a long time. Maybe this was my mission now. Not saving the world. Just teaching people how to see it better. It was dusk when I took Midnight up for a routine patrol. No escort. No mission brief. Just me and the bird. We flew over the valley, quiet and wide. The sky glowed orange, the kind of light that made everything feel still. Down below, the base looked peaceful. Orderly rows of hangars, lights blinking in rhythm, a place finally paying attention. I thought about what had changed. Not just the protocols or the briefings. The people. Rodriguez. Thompson. Haze. They weren't just better at their jobs. They were looking out for each other now. Listening. Trusting. When I touched down, I sat in the cockpit for a minute longer. Midnight's engines clicked softly as they cooled. I ran a hand over the panel, same way I used to after black flights years ago. A habit I never broke. Back in the bay, someone had left something on my workbench. A small brass plaque. No fanfare. Just 3 words, etched clean. We saw her. I didn't need medals. That was enough. Sometimes, the loudest stories come from the quietest places. And sometimes, all it takes is one forgotten pilot in a forgotten hangar to remind them that the shadows don't always hide danger. Sometimes, they protect it.